What if some of the most powerful medicines ever used on human wounds weren't discovered in a laboratory, or synthesized in a pharmaceutical plant, or approved after a decade of clinical trials, but were crawling, buzzing, and burrowing through the ancient world thousands of years before any of that existed? Most people hear the word bugs, and they think pest, nuisance, something to be eliminated. What they don't know is that ancient physicians in Egypt, in China, in the jungles of Central America, in the deserts of the Middle East, were watching insects with extraordinary precision and discovering medicines that modern science is still unpacking today. And in two remarkable cases, the FDA has approved living insects as medical treatment used in hospitals right now in the 21st century. Today I'm going to show you 10 ancient medicinal bug secrets that modern science has since validated or is actively proving right. These aren't myths. They aren't fringe remedies. Some are used in hospital treatment. Some are being investigated as the last line of defense against the antibiotic-resistant superbugs that are running out of treatments to fight them. And all of them were discovered by people who had nothing but careful observation and generations of accumulated experience. Stick around, because bug number 4 on this list was used as living surgical equipment by ancient civilizations on 3 separate continents, with no communication between them. And bug number 5 contains a compound that Galen documented in ancient Greece that modern dermatologists still use in clinics today to treat conditions that other treatments can't touch. If you want ancient life secrets, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Bug 1. The maggot, nature's microsurgeon. In the jungles of Central America, the Mayans were doing something to their wounded that would horrify most modern patients and impress most modern wound care specialists. They were allowing specific fly larvae to colonize open wounds, deliberately, not out of desperation, out of understanding. They had observed over generations that wounds treated this way healed cleanly. Wounds that weren't often didn't. Indigenous communities in Australia practiced the same technique. Civil War surgeon Dr. J.F. Zacharias documented it formally, writing that maggots cleaned gangrenous wounds faster than anything available, removing dead tissue while leaving healthy flesh completely untouched. What they were watching was extracorporeal digestion. Maggots of the green bottle blowfly secrete proteolytic enzymes that dissolve necrotic tissue into a semi-liquid they then consume. They feed exclusively on dead tissue. They cannot penetrate living cells. They also secrete compounds that raise wound pH into an alkaline environment where bacterial growth is suppressed and tissue regeneration accelerates. In vitro studies have confirmed maggot secretions destroy MRSA, the antibiotic-resistant superbug killing thousands in hospitals every year. In 2004, the FDA cleared medicinal maggots as a prescription-only medical device for non-healing necrotic wounds. At least 24 laboratories now supply them to hospitals in more than 30 countries. The Maya called it medicine. The FDA calls it a medical device. They are describing the same thing. Bug 2. The Leech, from bloodletting relic to reconstructive surgery essential. For centuries, leeches were the emblem of everything wrong with ancient medicine. Bloodletting. Humoral theory. By the 19th century, rational medicine had filed them alongside astrology, relics with nothing useful left to offer. And then reconstructive surgeons started reattaching severed limbs. When surgeons reattach a finger or a flap of skin, the arteries reconnect well, but the veins are smaller and far more likely to fail. When venous drainage fails, blood pools in the reattached tissue. It darkens and dies. No pharmaceutical could solve it. The leech does. Its saliva contains hirudin, one of the most powerful natural anticoagulants ever identified, plus an anesthetic, vasodilators that increase local blood flow, and enzymes that keep the wound draining for hours after detachment. In reconstructive surgery, this is the standard of care when venous congestion threatens a flap. No substitute has been found. Haycraft isolated hirudin from leech saliva in 1884, a discovery that eventually produced 3 FDA-approved drugs, lepirudin, bivalirudin, and desirudin, now used in cardiac surgery. In 2004, the FDA cleared medicinal leeches as medical devices for reconstructive surgery. Ancient physicians who used leeches were working from observation. The outcomes were real. The mechanism they had no language for was extraordinary. It took modern medicine 2,000 years to arrive at the same conclusion. Bug 3. The silkworm, the ancient anticonvulsant. A silkworm that died was more useful than one that lived. That was the counterintuitive discovery that Chinese physicians documented roughly 3,000 years ago. A larva killed by a specific fungal infection before it could spin its cocoon. They called it Jiangkan. White muscardine silkworm appeared to have medicinal properties the healthy silkworm did not. They prescribed it for convulsions, spasms, facial paralysis, and what they described as wind-related disorders of the nervous system. It appears in the first major Chinese medicinal monograph, Shennong's Materia Medica Classic, compiled between 100 and 200 AD. It was listed in every subsequent major pharmacopoeia of Chinese medicine across 2,000 years. Today, more than 300 insect species are filed in the Pharmacopoeia of the People's Republic of China, China's official national drug compendium, and the white muscardine silkworm remains among the most studied. What the ancient Chinese were observing was a biochemical reality they could not have named. The fungal infection that kills the silkworm triggers the larva to produce specific immune compounds, including flavonoid glycosides and a group of bioactive alkaloids, as a defense response. Those compounds, it turns out, modulate the central nervous system in ways that directly correspond to what ancient physicians observed clinically. Modern pharmacological research, published in Frontiers in Pharmacology, has confirmed anticonvulsant and neuroprotective activity in silkworm-derived compounds and mapped the mechanisms through which they interact with neurological signaling pathways. The compound is real. The effect is real. The ancient Chinese physicians were 3,000 years ahead of the explanation. Bug 4. The army ant, living surgical sutures. The technique is exactly what it sounds like, and it worked exactly as well as it sounds like it shouldn't have. When a wound needed to be closed, healers used ants. Large soldier ants with powerful mandibles. The wound edges were held together. The ant bit down across the wound, drawing the flesh closed. Then the body was twisted off. The jaws remained locked, clamped shut by reflex even in death, holding the wound closed. Organic sutures, no thread required. The Amazon rainforest, the savannas of sub-Saharan Africa, ancient India. 3 regions with no contact, no shared language, and no common medical tradition, each arriving at the same solution independently. This is documented in the Journal of Ethnobiology and in Ohio State University's entomology program course materials. 3 civilizations, the same tool, the same technique, because it worked. The biology runs deeper than the mechanics. Research into ant physiology has confirmed that many soldier ant species produce antimicrobial secretions, formic acid and complex peptides from glands throughout their bodies. When those mandibles hold a wound closed, those secretions are in direct contact with the wound bed. Ancient surgeons didn't know they were simultaneously suturing and disinfecting. The outcome data, built across 3 continents and thousands of years, told them it was worth doing. When the same solution appears independently on 3 continents, that is not coincidence. That is empirical evidence, refined by outcome, preserved because it worked. Bug 5, the blister beetle, the compound that went from Greek medicine to modern dermatology. The ancient Greek physician Galen documented it. Ancient Chinese medical texts prescribed it. Traditional practitioners across the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia used it for thousands of years. The compound is cantharidin, a defensive chemical secreted by blister beetles of the family Myeloidae. And it has one of the most direct and unbroken lines from ancient medicine to a modern clinical procedure of any compound in the history of entotherapy. Cantharidin causes controlled blistering of skin tissue. In ancient and traditional medicine, this property was used to raise blisters deliberately as a counter-irritant, as a treatment for skin lesions, and as a way to draw out what physicians of multiple traditions believed were pathological substances embedded in tissue. The biochemistry behind those ancient explanations was largely wrong. The clinical effect was not. When cantharidin is applied in a precisely controlled concentration to a wart or a molluscum contagiosum lesion, a common and notoriously difficult to treat viral skin infection, it causes the outer skin layers to separate from the underlying tissue. The blister forms. The lesion comes away with it. The healthy skin regenerates cleanly beneath. It is, mechanically, exactly what ancient physicians observed across thousands of years of application. Dermatologists today call it cantharidin therapy, used in clinics across North America, Europe, and Asia as a standard second-line treatment for warts and molluscum, particularly in pediatric cases where other treatments have failed. Galen prescribed it. Modern dermatology uses it. 2,000 years apart. Same compound. Same result. Bug 6. Propolis, the beehive's pharmacist. Most people know honey. Fewer know propolis. And almost no one knows propolis may be the more medically significant of the two. Propolis is the resinous substance bees collect from tree buds and bark, process with enzymes, and use to seal and sterilize every surface of the hive, maintaining a near-sterile environment inside a structure packed with thousands of organisms, warmth, humidity, and food. Conditions that should produce catastrophic infection. Ancient Egyptians documented propolis for wounds and infections, observing how bees used it and applying the same logic to human medicine. Greek and Roman physicians used it. In 300 BC, Aristotle described it in Historia Animalium as a remedy for skin conditions and infections. It appears in traditional medicine systems across Asia, the Middle East, and the Americas. Modern analysis has identified over 300 individual compounds in propolis, flavonoids, phenolic acids, terpenoids, many with confirmed antimicrobial, antifungal, and anti-inflammatory activity. A 2019 review in Oxidative Medicine and Cellular Longevity confirmed broad-spectrum antimicrobial activity, including against antibiotic-resistant strains. Clinical studies document effectiveness for oral ulcers, gingivitis, and post-extraction dental wound healing. The FDA regulates Propolis under its wound care and oral health frameworks. It is included in commercial wound dressings. The Egyptian physician who looked at a beehive watched how the bees maintained it and applied the same principle to a human wound, was not practicing primitive medicine. He was practicing logic that took 3,000 years to formally validate. Bug 7. The cockroach, the MRSA fighter nobody expected. The science here is real, from a credible institution covered by National Geographic and Science Daily. But it is early-stage laboratory research, not a clinical treatment. That distinction matters, and it makes the story more remarkable, not less. Researchers at the University of Nottingham noticed that soldiers returning from the Middle East were presenting with unusual bacterial infections. But locusts living in the same environments were infection-free. The insects were surviving conditions that were hospitalizing humans. The team ground up brain and nerve tissue from American cockroaches and desert locusts and incubated them with cultures of MRSA and E. coli. The insect brain tissue killed more than 90% of both strains, without harming human cells. The team identified up to 9 separate antibacterial molecules in the cockroach and locust nervous system, presented at the Society for General Microbiology's 2010 Autumn Conference. The ancient connection is not coincidence. Cockroaches have existed in human settlements as long as settlements have existed. The Compendium of Materia Medica, the 16th century Chinese pharmacopoeia, lists cockroach preparations for wound healing and inflammatory conditions. Ancient physicians observed outcomes they couldn't explain. The researchers at Nottingham are now finding the molecules that produced those outcomes. The ancient pharmacopoeia was ahead of the laboratory by 4 centuries. Bug 8. The Black Mountain Ant, the anti-inflammatory of ancient China. 3,000 years ago, Chinese physicians began prescribing the black mountain ant Polyrhachis vicina as a tonic for the joints. Ancient texts describe it replenishing vital energy, reducing persistent pain, prolonging life. It was consumed whole, ground, or steeped in wine. It was prescribed specifically for the elderly, for the loss of mobility and strength that ancient physicians associated with aging. That description maps almost exactly onto what researchers are now investigating in laboratory and early clinical settings. A peer-reviewed study in Biological and Pharmaceutical Bulletin examined the analgesic and anti-inflammatory activity of Polyrhachis lamelladens extracts, a closely related species. Results demonstrated significant pain-reducing and inflammation-suppressing effects, attributing the activity to alkaloids, polyunsaturated fatty acids, and zinc, all present in high concentrations in black mountain ant tissue. A 2013 study found ant venom fractions reduced joint inflammation in rheumatoid arthritis animal models at levels comparable to methotrexate, a frontline pharmaceutical, but through a different molecular pathway. Something that doesn't work doesn't survive 3,000 years in a tradition that tracked outcomes carefully enough to produce a pharmacopoeia. The ancient physicians were observing a real effect. The researchers are now finding the molecules. Bug 9b Venom, the ancient arthritis treatment science, is catching up to. Charlemagne reportedly used it. Ivan the Terrible reportedly used it. Hippocrates prescribed it. Egyptian physicians documented it. Chinese, Korean, and Indian medical traditions built entire therapeutic systems around it. No other insect remedy appears across as many separate civilizations, across as long a span of recorded history, for the same specific condition: joint pain and chronic inflammation. The active compound is melittin, the primary peptide in bee venom. In a full sting, it causes pain and swelling. In controlled microdosed application, it inhibits NF-κB, the master molecular switch governing the body's inflammatory response, the same driver behind cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, and most cancers. A 2024 PMC review confirmed that bee venom reduces arthritis-related damage to bone and cartilage by inhibiting the IRAK2 CTAK1-NF-κB pathway. Clinical trials have shown bee venom acupuncture effective for rheumatoid arthritis joint pain. This is promising, active research, not FDA-approved, and not without real risk, including severe allergic reaction. But the biology is real. The observation was real. What 50 centuries of empirical practice told physicians across Egypt, Greece, and China, the molecular biology is now explaining, one pathway at a time. Bug 10, the termite, the antibiotic Synergist, ancient Africa already knew. In the traditional medicine of northeast Brazil and across multiple indigenous communities in West Africa, particularly in Benin and Nigeria, the termite has been used as a medicinal organism for centuries. Not as a symbolic or ritual substance, as a clinical one. Traditional healers prescribed termite preparations specifically for infectious diseases, digestive disorders, and respiratory infections. The preparation methods varied. The target conditions were remarkably consistent. Modern ethnopharmacological research has begun testing what those healers observed. A study published in BMC Complementary Medicine and Therapies found that termite decoctions of Nasutitermes corniger demonstrated significant synergism with aminoglycoside antibiotics against strains of E. coli that were resistant to those antibiotics alone. In plain terms, the termite preparation, combined with an antibiotic, overcame resistance that the antibiotic could not overcome by itself. A separate +1 study identified multiple antimicrobial compounds in eastern subterranean termite hemolymph, including termicin, spinigerin, and lysozymes, with demonstrated antibacterial activity against human pathogens. The traditional healers were not wrong. They were simply centuries ahead of the vocabulary needed to explain what they were doing. 10 insects. Thousands of years of accumulated observation across civilizations that had no microscopes, no germ theory, and no peer-reviewed journals. What they had was something that produces the same result peer review is designed to produce. They paid attention to outcomes. They refined their preparations over generations, and they built their findings into traditions so durable that researchers are still mining them today and publishing what they find in some of the most respected scientific journals in the world. The line between ancient medicine and modern medicine is not a line between ignorance and knowledge. It is a line between observation and explanation. The ancient world had the observation. Modern science is still writing the explanation. Drop a comment and tell me which bug surprised you the most. We read every single one. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more ancient life secrets. We are just getting started.